They threw him out with nothing, but his dog led him to a cave someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. The night Jack Hale lost everything, he thought it was over. No home, no family, just silence and memories he couldn't escape. But his German shepherd, Bruno, refused to walk away. Deep in the mountains, Bruno led him to a sealed cave, one that wasn't empty. Inside, Jack uncovered a truth buried for years, a secret powerful enough to bring dangerous men back. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was something much bigger. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. They told him it was over. Not gently, not with understanding. Just a slammed door and a voice that had already made up its mind. You can't stay here anymore. Here. Jack. The words hung in the cold Montana air, like frost that refused to melt. Jack Hale stood on the front porch of the house he had grown up in, a duffel bag at his feet, his breath coming out in uneven bursts. His hands were shaking, though he couldn't tell if it was from the cold or the storm still raging inside his head. Behind him, the door opened again, just enough for his older brother, Mark, to step halfway out. Mark didn't look angry anymore. That would have been easier. He looked tired. You scared Mom, Mark said, voice low. You scared all of us. Jack swallowed. His throat felt dry like sand. I didn't mean to, he said, though even to his own ears, it sounded hollow. Inside his head, the memory was still alive. Too alive. The sound of something dropping in the kitchen had snapped him back years, not minutes. And for a split second, the house had turned into a dust-filled alley halfway across the world. He had seen movement where there was none, heard voices that weren't there. His body had reacted before his mind could catch up. By the time he realized where he was, a chair had been knocked over. A cabinet door ripped off its hinges, and his mother was pressed against the wall, eyes wide with fear. Jack shut his eyes now, trying to push the image away, but it clung to him. I'm trying, he said quietly. I really am. Mark shook his head, running a hand through his hair. Trying isn't enough anymore. The words landed heavier than anything else. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the trees, carrying that sharp, high-country chill that always came after sunset. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. But then another sound. Closer. A low, familiar rumble. Jack didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Bruno stepped onto the porch beside him, his large frame steady, his dark eyes locked on Jack's face. The German shepherd's ears were slightly back, reading the tension, the silence, the weight of everything that had just happened. Of course he's coming with you, Mark muttered. Figures. Jack reached down automatically, his hand finding Bruno's neck. The dog leaned into him, solid and warm, grounding him in a way nothing else ever could. He's all I've got, Jack said. Mark didn't argue. Instead, he exhaled slowly. There's a motel down in town. You can stay there a few nights. Figure something out. Jack let out a short, humorless breath. With what money? Mark hesitated. Mark. Then he pulled a folded envelope from his pocket and held it out. This came for you yesterday, he said. Didn't seem important at the time. Jack took it, his fingers brushing against the paper. It was worn, slightly creased, like it had been traveling for a while. There was no return address, just his name written in neat, careful handwriting. He stared at it for a moment, then tucked it into his jacket. Thanks, he said, though he wasn't sure what he was thanking him for. Mark nodded once. Then he stepped back inside. The door closed. This time, it didn't open again. Jack stood there for a long moment, staring at the wood grain of the door, as if it might change its mind, as if everything could rewind itself back to before the noise, before the flash, before the fear in his mother's eyes, but nothing moved, nothing changed. So the world had already decided. He picked up his duffel bag. "Come on, Bruno," he said. The dog fell into step beside him without hesitation. They walked down the gravel driveway together, the crunch of stones under their boots the only sound in the growing darkness. The house behind them faded into shadow, its windows glowing faintly, warmth and safety that no longer belonged to him. By the time they reached the road, Jack felt it again. That tightness in his chest, that creeping sense that something was wrong, that something was about to happen. His eyes scanned the tree line, the empty stretch of asphalt, the shifting shapes in the darkness. For a second, the quiet Montana road twisted into something else, something foreign, something dangerous. His breathing quickened. Bruno nudged his leg. Once, twice, grounding him. Jack blinked hard, forcing himself back. "It's just the road," he muttered. "Just the road." The dog stayed close, pressing lightly against him until the tension eased, until Jack's shoulders dropped just enough to breathe again. They kept walking. An hour passed, maybe more. Time didn't feel real anymore. Eventually, Jack found himself sitting on a broken wooden bench near an old gas station that had long since been abandoned. The windows were boarded up, the paint peeling, the place forgotten by everyone but the wind. Bruno lay at his feet, alert but calm, his eyes scanning the darkness in a way that felt almost human. Jack pulled the envelope from his jacket. For a moment, he just held it. Then he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Official. Clean. Cold. He read it once and then again. And then a third time, just to be sure. "You have been named the sole heir to a parcel of land located in Granite Ridge County, Montana." Jack frowned. "Approximately 20 acres, including a sealed limestone cave and surrounding structures." He let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "A cave," he said under his breath. Bruno lifted his head, ears twitching. Jack shook his head, staring at the paper. "Yeah, that's about right." He had nothing. No home, no job, no plan. And now, apparently, no one. Just a piece of land no one wanted. And a cave sealed shut somewhere in the mountains. For a second, the weight of it all pressed down on him so hard he thought he might break. Then Bruno shifted, resting his head on Jack's knee. Warm. Steady. Real. Jack looked down at him. "You ever feel like this is it?" he asked quietly. Like you've hit the bottom, and there's nowhere left to go?" Bruno didn't answer, of course. He just stayed there. Didn't leave. Didn't look away. Jack exhaled slowly, his hand resting on the dog's head. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me too." The wind moved through the empty station, carrying the faint scent of pine and cold earth. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled low across the mountains. Jack folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into his jacket. A cave. A worthless piece of land. It sounded like a joke. But it was something. And right now, something was more than he had an hour ago. He stood up, adjusting the strap of his duffel bag. "Come on, Bruno," he said again, his voice steadier this time. The dog rose instantly. Together, they stepped back onto the road. Jack didn't know what he would find out there. Didn't know if the place even still existed. Didn't know if it would save him or break him the rest of the way. But for the first time since the door slammed behind him, he had a direction. And in the darkness, that was enough to keep moving. He didn't see it yet. He didn't understand it yet. But somewhere, far up in those mountains, something was waiting. And Bruno already knew. Jack didn't sleep much that night. He stayed curled on the narrow bench outside the abandoned gas station, his duffel bag tucked under his arm, and Bruno pressed against his side like a living shield. Every time he drifted off, something pulled him back. An echo, a shadow, a sound that wasn't there. At one point, he woke up gasping, his heart hammering like it was trying to escape his chest. For a split second, while the dark sky above him turned into something else. Low, suffocating, filled with noise and pressure. Then Bruno's nose nudged his hand. Slow, steady, real. Jack exhaled, long and shaky, and stared up at the stars until his breathing settled again. By morning, the cold had settled into his bones. He stood up stiffly, rubbing his hands together, and looked down at Bruno. "Well," he muttered, voice rough, "we've got land now." Bruno tilted his head slightly, as if waiting for the part that actually made sense. Jack gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, me neither." The trip to Granite Ridge County took most of the day. Jack managed to hitch a ride with a man hauling lumber through the mountain roads, a quiet, weathered guy who didn't ask many questions. The truck rattled and groaned as it climbed higher into the mountains, showed the air growing thinner, sharper. The farther they went, the more the world seemed to fall away. Towns became scattered houses. Houses became empty stretches of land. Roads narrowed into winding paths that twisted through dense forests and steep ridges. By the time the driver finally slowed and pointed ahead, there was nothing but trees, rock, and sky. "This is about as far as I go," the man said. "Granite Ridge is up that way. Not much out there." Jack nodded. "Thanks." The truck pulled away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and the low rumble of the engine fading into silence. Then there was nothing. No voices, no traffic, no signs of life. Just wind moving through tall pines and the distant call of something wild, echoing across the valley. Jack adjusted the strap of his bag and looked down at Bruno. "This it?" "Uh-huh." Bruno stood still for a moment, ears forward, nose lifting slightly as he caught the scent of something carried on the breeze. Then, without hesitation, he started walking. Jack let out a breath. "Guess we're going this way." They followed a narrow dirt trail that barely deserved to be called a road. It climbed slowly through the trees, curving along the side of the mountain. The ground was uneven, scattered with loose stones and roots that threatened to trip every step. After about a mile, the trees began to thin. The land opened up, and there it was. Jack stopped. The property, if you could call it that, stretched out in front of him like something forgotten by time itself. 20 acres of rough, uneven ground, dotted with scrub, broken fence posts, and patches of wild grass that had long since grown out of control. While at the far edge, a line of jagged limestone rose up from the earth, pale and weathered, like the bones of something ancient, and set into that rock. A door. Half hidden by brush and shadow, it stood crooked and worn, its surface darkened with age. A rusted chain wrapped around it, secured with a heavy padlock that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Jack stared at it. "A cave," he said quietly. The word felt strange in his mouth. Bruno didn't hesitate. The dog moved forward, quick and focused, his paws crunching over dry leaves and gravel. As he got closer to the rock face, his pace changed, slower now, more deliberate. Then he stopped, right in front of the door. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Jack felt it immediately, that shift. The air didn't change, the wind didn't stop. But something felt different. And he walked up beside Bruno, his eyes scanning the area. The rock face loomed above them, cold and silent. The door stood there like it had been waiting. "You smell something?" Jack asked. Bruno didn't look away. Instead, he stepped closer to the door and began scratching at the base of it, his movements sharp, urgent. Dirt and small stones scattered as his paws dug in. "Hey, easy," Jack said, instinctively reaching out. But Bruno didn't stop. He barked once, loud, sharp, echoing off the rock. Then again. Jack frowned. What is it? The dog pressed his nose to the crack beneath the door, breathing in deeply, then pulling back and whining low in his throat. That wasn't fear. It wasn't aggression. It was recognition. Jack felt a slow, uneasy tension build in his chest. He turned, scanning the land again. Nothing moved. No signs of anyone. No tracks, no smoke, no sound except the wind. Still, something about the place didn't feel empty. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Yeah, he muttered. Probably just rats or something. But his voice didn't sound convinced. He stepped closer to the door, crouching down to examine the lock. It was old, rusted, but still intact. The chain was thick, heavy-duty. Whoever had sealed this place hadn't wanted it opened easily. Jack ran his fingers over the cold metal. Guess we're not getting in today, he said. Bruno let out a soft, frustrated huff. Jack stood up and looked around again. The land was rough, but not useless. There was a flat stretch near the tree line where he could set up something temporary. A small stream cut through the far side of the property. He could hear it faintly if he focused. The rock wall might even offer some shelter from the wind. It wasn't much, but it was something. He turned back to Bruno. We'll figure it out. The dog finally stepped away from the door, though he glanced back at it more than once as he followed Jack. That night, they made camp near the edge of the trees. Jack gathered what wood he could find, his hands stiff from the cold, and managed to get a small fire going. The flames flickered weakly at first, then steadied, casting long shadows that danced across the uneven ground. Bruno lay close, his body angled toward the darkness beyond the firelight. Watching. Always watching. Jack sat with his back against a fallen log, staring into the flames. The quiet pressed in around him, deeper than anything he had known before. No distant cars, no voices, no hum of life, just silence. Oh, the kind that made your thoughts louder. Too loud. He closed his eyes. For a moment, it was peaceful. Then, a sound. Sharp, sudden. His eyes snapped open. The firelight shifted, and the trees at the edge of the clearing seemed to move. Jack's body tensed instantly, every muscle locking into place. He reached for something that wasn't there. His breathing changed. Fast, controlled, ready. The clearing wasn't a clearing anymore. It was something else. Somewhere else. Contact, he whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible. Bruno moved. Fast. The dog stepped directly in front of him, blocking his view of the trees. A low, steady growl filled the air, not at anything specific, but enough to pull Jack's focus. Hey, Jack said, his voice strained. Bruno nudged him, harder this time. Jack blinked. But the trees were just trees again. The fire was just fire. The silence returned. He let out a long, shaky breath and ran a hand over his face. Yeah, he murmured. I'm here. Bruno stayed close, pressing against him until the tension faded. After a while, Jack leaned back again, his eyes drifting toward the dark outline of the rock wall in the distance. Even from here, he could see it. The door. Something about it pulled at him. Not like a threat. Not exactly. More like a question. He didn't have answers. Not yet. But as the fire burned low and the cold crept back in, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was behind that door, it wasn't just a cave. And Bruno had known it the moment they arrived. The wind shifted, carrying a faint, earthy scent from the direction of the rock. Bruno lifted his head again, watching, waiting, and somewhere deep in the mountain, something waited back. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a dim, flickering light across the clearing. The wind had quieted, but the cold had settled in deeper, wrapping around everything like a heavy blanket. Jack didn't sleep. Not really. He drifted in and out, never fully letting go, his senses always half alert. Every small sound, the snap of a branch, the shift of gravel, the whisper of wind through the trees, pulled him back to the surface. And every time, Bruno was there, still, awake, watching. At some point, the sky began to lighten. A thin gray blue spread across the horizon, pushing back the darkness just enough to reveal the outline of the land again. The limestone ridge stood silent in the distance, pale against the early morning light. Jack sat up slowly, his joints stiff, his breath visible in the cold air. Bruno was already on his feet, facing the ridge. Jack followed his gaze. "That thing again, huh?" he muttered. Bruno didn't move. He didn't look away. Jack let out a breath and pushed himself to stand. "All right, let's go take another look." They walked toward the rock wall in silence, the ground crunching under their boots. The morning light revealed more details now, the cracks in the stone, the tangled brush, the way the door sat slightly uneven in its frame. And Bruno, the closer they got, the faster he moved. By the time they reached the base of the ridge, he was already there, pawing at the dirt, nose pressed low, tail stiff. "Easy," Jack said, though there was no real authority in it. Bruno barked once, sharp, then again. Yet Jack crouched beside him, brushing aside loose dirt near the bottom of the door. "What are you seeing?" The dog kept digging, more aggressively now, claws scraping against something harder beneath the soil. Jack leaned closer. There. A faint gap, a narrow slit beneath the door, just wide enough for air to pass through. Bruno pressed his nose against it again, inhaling deeply. Then he pulled back and whined. Not fear, not pain, something else. Urgency. Jack felt it again, that tightening in his chest, that instinct that something was off. He placed his hand against the door, cold, solid. But beneath it, a faint draft. Barely noticeable, but there. Air moving. From inside. Jack frowned. "Okay," he said slowly. "That's not normal." He stood up, stepping back, studying the door more carefully now. Well, the chain was rusted, but not broken. The lock looked old, but still secure. Who sealed it? And why? Bruno barked again, louder this time, and began circling the area, nose to the ground. He moved along the base of the rock wall, then back to the door, then away again, tracking something. "Hey, what is it?" Jack called. Bruno stopped a few yards to the left of the door. Then he started digging again, hard. Jack hesitated for a second, then moved over and dropped to his knees beside him. The soil here was looser, mixed with small stones and roots. Together, they cleared away a shallow layer. And then, wood. Jack froze. "Hold on." He brushed away more dirt, revealing the edge of something buried. A small, weathered plank, half-rotted, hidden just beneath the surface. He pulled at it. It shifted. Bruno stepped back, watching closely. Jack gripped the edge and tugged harder. The plank came loose with a dull crack, exposing a narrow opening beneath, just big enough to see into. Darkness. Deep. Unbroken. A cool breath of air rose up from below, carrying with it a scent Jack couldn't quite place. Earth. Stone. And something older. Bruno leaned forward immediately, nose twitching, ears alert. "No," Jack said quickly, placing a hand on his collar. "Easy." The dog resisted, just for a second. then stilled. Jack leaned closer, peering into the gap. Nothing. No movement. No light. Just darkness. But it wasn't empty. He could feel that much. A low hum built in the back of his mind, the same instinct that had kept him alive more times than he could count. Something was down there. Something real. Jack pulled back slowly, and his heart beginning to beat faster. "We need tools," he said under his breath. "We're not doing this blind." Bruno let out a low whine. Jack looked at him. I know, but we do this right." He stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. For a moment he just stared at the door again. The chain, the lock, the hidden opening. Whoever had sealed this place hadn't just locked the front. They'd hidden another way in. Why? Jack felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear. Not exactly. Curiosity. Sharp. Alive. "All right," he said finally. "Let's see what we've got." The rest of the morning passed in slow, deliberate work. Jack returned to their small camp and dug through his bag, pulling out what little he had. An old pocket knife, a length of cord, a flashlight with weak batteries. Not much, but enough to start. He tested the flashlight. A dim beam flickered to life. "Great," he muttered. "That'll last 10 minutes. Bruno watched him the entire time, restless, pacing, glancing back toward the ridge as if afraid whatever was there might disappear if they waited too long. Jack noticed. "You really don't want to leave that thing alone, do you?" Bruno stopped, looked at him, then turned and walked a few steps toward the ridge. Stopped, looked back. Jack let out a quiet breath. "Yeah," he said. "I get it." By midday, they were back at the opening. The light was stronger now, cutting across the rock face, but it didn't reach inside the gap. The darkness below remained untouched. Jack crouched down again, switching on the flashlight and angling it into the opening. Went the beam stretched down and down, further than it should have. "Jesus," he whispered. It wasn't just a hole. It was a shaft, a narrow drop, maybe 8 or 10 feet, leading into a larger space below. Stone walls. Rough, natural, but shaped, somehow. Not entirely untouched. Jack's grip tightened on the flashlight. "You seeing this?" he murmured. Bruno let out a low, steady growl. Jack hesitated. His heart started to race, not from fear of what was down there, but from something else. A shift. The ground beneath him felt less like ground, and more like the edge of something. He swallowed. "Okay," he said quietly. "We go slow." He tied the cord around a nearby root, testing it twice before looping it around his arm. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Then he swung his legs over the edge. For a moment, as everything went still. The world narrowed. The air felt different, cooler, denser. Jack closed his eyes briefly, and just for a second. The darkness wasn't a cave. It was somewhere else, somewhere far away. Tight, close, breathing down his neck. His chest tightened, his fingers clenched. Bruno barked, loud, sharp, right above him. Jack's eyes snapped open. The rock was still rock. The air was still air. He wasn't there anymore. He was here. He let out a breath. "I'm good," he said, though his voice was tight. Bruno didn't look convinced, but he didn't move. Jack adjusted his grip and lowered himself down, one foot, then the other. The rope strained slightly, but held, and then his boots touched ground, solid, cool. He let go of the rope and stood there for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. At the beam of the flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing the space around him. stone walls, a wide chamber, and something else. Lines. Straight lines. Not natural. Built. Jack's breath caught. Above him, Bruno whined softly. "Yeah," Jack whispered, turning slowly. "You were right." The cave wasn't empty, not even close. And whatever had been built down here, it wasn't meant to be forgotten. Jack stood still in the dim chamber, the beam of his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The air down here was colder, but not dead. It moved. Slowly, almost like a breath that had been held for years and was only now being released. He turned in a slow circle. The walls weren't just rock. They had been shaped, not perfectly, not clean like modern construction, but deliberate. Sections had been carved flat, and as grooves ran along the stone at even intervals, like someone had measured them. Built, not discovered. Jack swallowed. Who the hell made this? Above him, Bruno barked again, sharp and impatient. "I'm okay," Jack called up, his voice echoing softly through the chamber. "Stay there." Bruno didn't like that. Jack could hear it in the low whine that followed. But he stayed. Always stayed. Jack shifted the flashlight forward and took a step deeper into the cave. His boots scraped lightly against the ground. Not dirt. Packed earth, mixed with something smoother. He crouched down and ran his fingers across it. Stone tiles. Crude. Uneven. But placed. His chest tightened. Not with fear this time, but with something heavier. Recognition. This wasn't survival. This was planning. Someone had lived here. Not briefly. Not accidentally. On purpose. Jack moved forward slowly, his light sweeping across the chamber. And then, a wall. Different from the others. Not carved. Stacked. Flat stones, layered carefully to create a vertical surface. At first, it looked like nothing. Then the light caught something. Metal. Jack stepped closer. A hook. And hanging from it, a lantern. Old. Rusted. But intact. Jack reached out, hesitating for a second before touching it. The metal was cold, rough under his fingers. He lifted it carefully. Still had weight. Still had a wick inside. He stared at it for a long moment. Someone had left this here. Not discarded. Placed. Waiting. Jack felt that strange pull again, like he was stepping into something that had been paused, not abandoned. He set the lantern back exactly where it had been. "Okay," he whispered. Then he noticed something else. To the right of the stone wall. A narrow opening. Not natural. Cut. A passage. Jack angled the flashlight inside. The beam stretched into darkness, but it caught edges. More stone, more shaping, more intent. He hesitated. The silence pressed in around him. For a moment, the cave felt smaller, tighter. His breathing slowed, then sped up. The edges of his vision shifted. Not here. Not now. Something inside him started to slip. Bruno barked, loud, sharp, right above the opening. Jack blinked hard. The cave snapped back into place. He sucked in a breath and stepped back from the passage. "Yeah," he muttered. "Not doing that yet." He turned away, forcing his focus elsewhere. That's when he saw it. In the far corner of the chamber. A shape, low, rectangular, and Jack moved toward it slowly, his boots echoing softly. As the light reached it, the shape became clear. A table. Rough wood. Weathered, but still standing. And on top of it, a book. Jack froze. "No way." He stepped closer, his heart picking up again. The book was thick, bound in worn leather, its edges curled with age. Dust had settled over it, but not enough to bury it completely. He reached out, paused, then picked it up. The cover creaked softly as he opened it. Inside. Handwriting. Careful. Measured. Faded, but still readable. Jack's breath caught. This is a journal. He flipped a few pages. Dates, entries, drawings, simple diagrams of the cave, sections, tunnels, markings, and notes. So many notes. Water flow, light angles, plant growth. Jack's eyes widened. Whoever built this, they planned everything. He turned another page. A name. Written at the top, Elias Hale. Jack went still. The name hit him harder than anything else. Hale. His last name. His throat tightened. No, he whispered. He flipped back, checked again. Elias Hale. The letters were clear, unmistakable. Jack's hands trembled slightly. My grandfather. The one they used to talk about in half-jokes and quiet conversations. The one they said had gone strange in his later years, obsessed with isolation, with projects. The one who disappeared from the family long before Jack was born. Jack stared down at the page, his mind trying to catch up. He built this? The idea felt impossible, and yet, everything around him said it was true. Jack turned another page. More notes, more diagrams. A system, but not just a cave. A design. Something meant to function, to sustain, to survive. He felt something shift inside his chest. Not fear, not confusion. Something else. For the first time since he'd been thrown out, he didn't feel lost. He felt connected. Like this place wasn't just random. Like it had been waiting for him. Above, Bruno barked again, shorter this time, more urgent. Jack looked up. I'm coming. He closed the journal carefully and tucked it under his arm. Then he turned back toward the shaft. The climb up was slower, harder. But when his hand finally reached the edge and Bruno's teeth gently caught his sleeve, helping pull him the last few inches, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief. Not exactly. Something steadier. Bruno licked his hand once, quick and firm. But Jack gave a small, tired smile. Yeah, he said quietly. You knew. The dog stepped back, watching him closely. Jack sat there for a moment, catching his breath, the journal resting in his lap. The wind moved across the ridge, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. He looked back at the door, then down at the hidden opening, then at the journal. This isn't just land, he murmured. Bruno tilted his head. Jack nodded slowly. No, he said. This is something else. He stood up, gripping the journal tighter. For the first time since everything fell apart. He wasn't thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about what he had found, and deep inside the mountain. The rest of the story was still waiting. Jack didn't rush back down into the cave. Not that day. Instead, when he sat outside the rock face with the journal in his hands, the pages spread open across his knees as the afternoon sun drifted slowly across the valley. The light warmed the stone behind him, but the air still carried that sharp mountain chill. Bruno stayed close, always close. Every few minutes, the dog would glance toward the hidden opening, then back at Jack, as if reminding him, quietly, that something important still lay beneath their feet. I know, Jack murmured once without looking up. We'll get there. But for now, he read, line by line, word by word. Elias Hale's handwriting was steady, almost methodical. Not the scattered scribbles of a madman like the family had always said, but precise, thoughtful, intentional. Jack flipped through pages slowly, his fingers brushing over sketches of tunnels, arrows marking airflow, just notes about sunlight angles carved into the rock above certain openings. There were systems here: water collection, heat retention, food storage. This isn't crazy, Jack said under his breath. This is smart. Bruno huffed softly, as if agreeing. Jack turned another page. There, drawings of small planting beds inside the cave, positioned beneath narrow shafts that allowed light to filter down. Notes about soil mixtures, moisture levels, even crude schedules. His chest tightened again, not with panic, with something deeper. Respect. My whole life, Jack muttered, staring at the page. They said you lost it. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying no answer. But the proof sat in his hands. Elias Hale hadn't lost his mind. He'd built something that still worked. How Jack looked out over the rough land again. 20 acres of nothing, they'd said. Worthless. But now, he saw it differently. The flat stretch near the trees, the stream beyond the ridge, the cave system beneath the stone. It wasn't nothing. It was a beginning. Jack closed the journal slowly. All right, he said. Bruno's ears perked. Jack stood, brushing dirt from his jeans. We start small. That night, the fire burned a little stronger. Jack had gathered more wood, stacking it carefully this time, building a proper base instead of the rushed pile from the night before. The flames rose steady and controlled, casting a warm glow that pushed the darkness farther back. Bruno lay beside him, head resting on his paws, but his eyes stayed open. Watching. Jack leaned back against a rock, the journal open again in his lap, and he found a section marked with a simple drawing, 3 lines forming a triangle. Airflow. He flipped back, then forward again. Notes about ventilation, how heat moved, how cold settled. Jack looked up at the ridge, then back at the fire, then at Bruno. Hey, he said, a faint spark of something new in his voice. What if we're doing this wrong? Bruno blinked at him. Jack stood suddenly, grabbing a long branch from the pile of wood. He walked a few feet away from the fire and drove the branch into the ground at an angle. Then another, and another. Bruno stood, watching closely now. What if we block the wind here? Jack said, half to himself, half to the dog, and let the heat stay low. He worked quickly, adjusting the angle, stacking smaller branches along the base, but creating a rough barrier between the fire and the open clearing. It wasn't perfect, but when he stepped back, the difference was immediate. The fire held its shape better. The warmth stayed closer. Jack felt it on his face, stronger than before. He let out a short breath of disbelief. Well, I'll be... Bruno wagged his tail once. Jack looked down at him, a faint grin breaking through. Yeah, he said. We might actually figure this out. That night, he slept. Not deeply, not completely, but enough. And when the dreams came, they weren't as loud. Morning came with a pale golden light stretching across the valley. Jack woke to the sound of water. Not imagined. Real. He sat up slowly, blinking against the light. Bruno was already standing, facing the trees. Jack followed his gaze. Stream, he said. Bruno barked once. Jack grabbed his canteen. Let's check it out. The walk to the stream was short, but uneven. The ground dipped slightly as they moved through a cluster of trees, the air growing cooler and damp. Then they heard it. Clear, steady, water moving over stone. Jack pushed through the last line of brush and stopped. A narrow stream cut through the land, winding between rocks and fallen branches. The water was clean, clear enough to see the stones beneath the surface. Jack crouched down, dipping his hand in. Cold, fresh. He brought it to his lips, tasted it, then nodded. "Okay," he said. "That's one thing solved." Bruno stepped into the shallow edge, drinking quickly, then looking back at Jack as if to say, "What's next?" Jack smiled faintly. "Yeah, one step at a time." The days began to take shape after that. It was simple, slow, but steady. Jack cleared a small area near the trees, using a broken piece of metal he'd found near the ridge as a makeshift tool. It wasn't much, but it worked. Bruno stayed close, always moving just ahead or just behind, scanning the area, listening to things Jack couldn't hear. At night, they stayed by the fire. During the day, Jack read. The journal became his guide. Page after page, Elias Hale's words unfolded into something Jack could follow, something he could build on. And little by little, the land changed. Not all at once, but enough. A cleared patch of ground, a better fire pit, a place to sit that didn't feel temporary. Jack noticed it one evening as the sun dipped low behind the ridge. He stood in the middle of the clearing, looking around. The same land, the same trees, the same rock wall, but it didn't feel the same. It felt lived in. Bruno walked up beside him, sitting quietly. Jack looked down at him. "You know," he said softly, "a week ago, I had nothing." Bruno nudged his hand. Jack nodded. "Yeah," he murmured. "Not nothing." He looked back toward the cave, the hidden opening, the sealed door. "I think this place ought to..." He paused, searching for the right words. "I think it's giving me something back." The wind moved through the trees again, softer this time. Not empty, not cold. Just there. Jack exhaled slowly. For the first time in a long time. He didn't feel like he was just surviving. He felt like he was building something. And beside him, Bruno stayed. Always. The dog who had pulled him out of darkness more than once. The dog who never let go. Jack rested a hand on Bruno's head, and his voice quiet. "Let's see how far we can take this." The next morning came with a strange kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence Jack had felt when he first arrived, but something lighter. The kind that settled in after a decision had been made. He moved with purpose now. Not fast, not rushed, but steady. Jack stepped out into the clearing, the early light brushing across the land in soft gold tones. The fire pit still held warmth from the night before, a thin line of smoke drifting upward into the cold air. Bruno stood nearby, ears alert, scanning the tree line. Jack noticed that first. The dog wasn't relaxed, not like the past few days. Something had shifted. "You hear something?" Jack asked. Bruno didn't bark, didn't growl, he just stood still, watching. Jack followed his gaze. At first there was nothing. Then, a sound. Faint. Distant. An engine. Jack's body reacted before his mind did. His shoulders tensed. His breath slowed. Every muscle locked into that familiar readiness. Bruno moved closer to him instantly. Low. Protective. The sound grew louder. Not fast, not aggressive, but steady. coming up the same narrow path Jack had taken days before. Jack's eyes narrowed. "No one comes out here," he muttered. The truck appeared a moment later, cresting the ridge like it didn't belong in the landscape at all. Black. Clean. Too clean. It rolled to a slow stop near the edge of the property, the engine idling softly. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, well-dressed, boots that had never seen real dirt. He looked around slowly, taking in the land, the ridge, the clearing. Then his eyes landed on Jack, and stayed there. Bruno let out a low growl. Jack rested a hand on his back. "Easy." The man walked forward, not rushing, his posture calm, too calm, as if he already knew exactly where he was, and exactly what he was looking at. "Jack Hale," the man said, stopping a few yards away. Not a question, a statement. Jack didn't respond right away. "Depends who's asking." The man smiled faintly. "Calvin Rourke." The name didn't mean anything to Jack, but something about the way he said it, like it should, like it mattered. Rourke glanced around again, his eyes lingering briefly on the ridge behind Jack. Then the door. Then back to Jack. "You inherited this place, my son," he said. Again, not a question. Jack crossed his arms. "Looks that way." Rourke nodded slowly. Must have come as a surprise." Jack shrugged. "Not as much as you showing up out here." A flicker of something passed through Rourke's expression. Amusement. "Fair," he said. He took another step forward. Bruno's growl deepened. Rourke stopped immediately. He glanced down at the dog, studying him for a moment longer than necessary. "That's a good animal," he said. Jack didn't like the way he said that. "Yeah," Jack replied flatly. "He is." Rourke looked back at him. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "I'm interested in your land." Jack didn't react. Not outwardly, but something inside him tightened. "Why?" Rourke smiled again. "Because it's here," he said simply. "And because I've been trying to acquire this ridge for a while now." Jack glanced back at the limestone wall, then at the door. But then at the hidden opening he hadn't shown anyone. His jaw tightened. "Funny," Jack said. Nobody else seemed interested. Rourke's smile didn't change. "Most people don't see value where it isn't obvious." Jack held his gaze. "And you do?" Rourke tilted his head slightly. "I see potential." The word hung in the air. Jack felt it. That subtle shift again. This wasn't casual. This wasn't random. Rourke knew something. Or at least, he thought he did. Jack stepped slightly to the side, placing himself more directly between Rourke and the ridge. Bruno mirrored the movement instantly. Rourke noticed. Of course he did. His eyes flicked between them, calculating. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "A formal offer," he said, holding it out. "More than fair, given the condition of the land." Jack didn't take it. Rourke held it there for a moment longer, then lowered it slightly. "You should at least look," he said. Jack shook his head. "I just got here." "All the more reason," Rourke replied smoothly. "No attachment, no history, clean exit." Jack almost laughed. "No history," he repeated. He glanced down at Bruno, then back at the ridge, then at Rourke. "Yeah," Jack said quietly. "That's not how it works." Rourke studied him more closely now, something colder behind his eyes. "You don't strike me as someone who plans to stay," he said. Jack's chest tightened. There it was, that assumption, that judgment. He felt it rising, the old pressure, the edge of something he used to lose control to. Bruno shifted, pressed closer, grounding him. Jack exhaled slowly. I'm still here," he said. Rourke didn't respond right away. Then he nodded once. "Think about it," he said, folding the paper again. "This place isn't what you think it is." Jack's eyes narrowed. "And what is that supposed to mean?" Rourke's gaze drifted briefly to the ridge again, then back. "It means," he said calmly, "some things are buried for a reason." A chill ran through Jack's spine. Bruno barked, sharp, warning. Rourke stepped back slightly, then gave a small, polite nod. "I'll be in touch," he said. He turned and walked back toward the truck without another word. The engine started. The vehicle rolled away. And just like that, he was gone. The sound faded into the distance. The silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence. Jack stood there, staring at the empty road. Bruno remained at his side, tense, alert. After a long moment, Jack spoke. "He knows." Bruno huffed softly. Jack looked back at the ridge, at the door, at the hidden opening. "He didn't come out here for land," Jack said quietly. The wind shifted, cold, sharp, carrying that same faint scent from the cave. Jack's grip tightened at his side. "This isn't over." Bruno stepped forward, placing himself between Jack and the ridge again, just like before, protecting, always protecting. Jack rested a hand on his back. "Yeah," he murmured. "I know." The calm was gone now, in its place. Something else had taken hold. Not fear, not doubt. A challenge. And deep down, Jack felt it. Whatever this place was, whatever his grandfather had built, someone else wanted it. Badly. The air felt different after Rourke left. Heavier. Just like the mountain itself had shifted. Just enough to let something darker settle in. Jack didn't say much that evening. He moved through the motions, checking the fire, stacking wood, walking the edge of the clearing. But his mind stayed fixed on one thing. Rourke's eyes. That look. Not curiosity. Not interest. Ownership. Bruno stayed closer than usual. Not wandering. Not scouting ahead. Always within reach. Every few seconds his ears would twitch, his head turning toward sounds Jack couldn't hear yet. "You feel it too, huh?" Jack muttered. Bruno didn't answer, but he didn't relax. That night, the fire burned low. Not because Jack forgot, but because he didn't want the light. Didn't want to be seen. He sat in the shadows, the journal resting beside him, his eyes drifting between the ridge and the dark tree line. Sleep didn't come. It never really did anymore. Just fragments, half moments. At some point, the wind picked up, then died again. Then, a sound. Not natural. Too sharp. Too controlled. Jack's eyes snapped open. Bruno was already on his feet. Silent. Focused. The sound came again. Closer. Footsteps. Jack's body reacted instantly. He moved without thinking, pulling himself low behind the fallen log, his breathing steady, controlled. Bruno crouched beside him, muscles tight, watching, waiting. A shadow moved at the edge of the clearing, then another. Jack's jaw clenched. Not one. More than one. They didn't speak, didn't call out, just moved, deliberate. One of them stepped closer to the ridge. Jack's heart pounded once, hard. The cave. They were heading for the cave. "No," he whispered under his breath. Bruno let out a low growl. Jack placed a hand gently on his neck. "Not yet," he breathed. They needed to know, needed to see. The figures reached the rock wall. One of them shone a light, brief, quick, just enough to locate the door. Then another moved to the side, to the hidden opening. Jack felt a cold wave run through him. They knew, not guessing, not searching. They knew exactly where to go, and the second man dropped to his knees and started working at the opening, clearing dirt with fast, practiced movements. Jack's pulse spiked. "No," he said again, louder this time. Bruno barked, loud, explosive. The men froze, then turned. "Hey!" one of them shouted. Too late. Jack was already moving. He broke from cover, sprinting across the clearing, his boots hitting the ground hard. "Get away from there!" he yelled. While the men reacted instantly, one stepped forward, raising a hand. "Back off!" Jack didn't slow. Bruno surged ahead of him, faster, a blur of muscle and motion. The dog launched forward with a deep, thunderous bark. The man stumbled back, caught off guard. The second one moved toward the opening again. Jack saw it. Everything narrowed. The world shrank to that single moment. "No!" he lunged. The two men collided with him at once. Not a fight, not clean, just chaos. Hands grabbing, bodies shifting. Jack's breath left his chest as he hit the ground, the impact sending a sharp shock through his ribs. Bruno barked again, fierce, relentless. One of the men tried to push past. Bruno blocked him. The man hesitated. Just long enough. Jack drove forward, forcing himself up, shoving one of them back. "Why, get off my land!" he shouted, his voice raw. The second man grabbed something from the ground. A tool, heavy. He swung. Not at Jack, at the structure behind him. The makeshift barrier, the fire pit, wood splintered. Jack froze for half a second. Then everything snapped. "Stop!" He moved again, faster, harder, driven by something deeper than thought. But the damage was already done. The men didn't stay. They didn't need to. They'd seen enough, done enough. They backed away quickly, retreating toward the trees. "Tell him we came," one of them said under his breath. Then they were gone. Just like that. The clearing fell silent again. But it wasn't the same silence. Jack stood there, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling as he looked around. The fire pit was smashed, the wood scattered. The small area he'd cleared, destroyed. His hands shook, not from fear, from something else, something heavier. Bruno whined. Jack turned. The dog stood a few feet away, not moving. Jack's heart dropped. "Bruno?" The dog took a step, then another, slow, unsteady. Jack moved toward him quickly. Hey, what happened?" Bruno's side was dark. Jack dropped to his knees, his breath caught. Come on! Come on! He pressed his hands gently against Bruno's fur, searching, checking. The dog flinched slightly. Not badly, but enough. Jack swallowed hard. "It's okay," he said, his voice tight. "You're okay." Bruno looked up at him, still alert, still present, still trying to stand strong. Jack's chest tightened painfully. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. Bruno nudged his hand, as if to say, "Yes, I did." Jack closed his eyes for a moment, and just like that, everything hit him. The land, the cave, Rourke, the attack, the destruction. It all came crashing down at once. He sat there in the dirt, holding on to Bruno, his breathing uneven. "I can't lose this too," he said quietly. The words barely made it out. Bruno stayed close, always close. The wind moved across the ridge again, cold, unforgiving. Jack opened his eyes slowly. The clearing was wrecked, The small sense of stability he'd built, gone. Again. Just like before. Just like always. He looked down at Bruno. Still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. Jack took a long, slow breath. "No," he said. His voice was different now. Not broken. Not lost. Something else. "They don't get to take this." Bruno lifted his head slightly. Jack nodded. "We're not done." The fire was gone. The camp was broken. The night was closing in. But Jack didn't move. He stayed right there, beside the one thing that hadn't left him. And this time, he wasn't going to lose everything again. The night settled in without asking. No fire, no warmth, just the cold creeping across the ground, filling every space where something used to be. Jack didn't move much. He stayed beside Bruno, one hand resting gently along the dog's side, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breathing. It wasn't steady, not like usual, but it was there, still there. That was enough, for now. The stars came out one by one, cold and distant above the ridge. The same sky as always, but it felt farther away tonight, like it belonged to a different world. Jack leaned back slightly, his body exhausted, and his mind running in quiet circles. Every sound made him tense. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. But there were no more footsteps, no more voices. Just silence, the kind that follows something breaking. Bruno shifted slightly, letting out a low breath. Jack immediately leaned forward. "Hey," he whispered. "Easy. Easy." The dog blinked slowly, his eyes still alert, still focused, even through the pain. Jack swallowed hard. "You're not done," he said softly. "You hear me?" Bruno's tail moved, just once. Small, but enough. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Yeah," he murmured. "That's what I thought." He looked around the clearing, what was left of it. Broken wood, scattered supplies. The place he had started to build, gone, again. The old feeling tried to come back. That weight, no, that pull. The voice that said it was easier to walk away. Jack closed his eyes. For a moment, he wasn't in the clearing anymore. He was somewhere else. Different ground. Different night. The same feeling. Loss. Failure. The sense that no matter what he did, it would always end the same way. His chest tightened. His breathing shortened. The edges of the world started to close in. Not here. Not now. Bruno made a sound. Soft. Barely there. But enough. Jack's eyes snapped open. The clearing came back into focus. The cold. The dark. The real. He placed his hand firmly on Bruno's neck. "I'm here," he said quietly. Not to the dog. To himself. The pressure eased. Slowly. Not gone. But manageable. Jack leaned forward, pressing his forehead lightly against Bruno's. "We're still here," he whispered. Time passed. Hard to tell how much. Minutes. Maybe hours. The cold deepened. Jack finally moved. Carefully. Slowly. He gathered what he could from the wreckage. Pieces of wood, broken but still usable. His hands worked automatically. His movements deliberate. Controlled. Not rushed. Not panicked. Focused. He rebuilt the fire pit. Not like before, but better. Lower. Protected. Tucked closer to the rock where the wind couldn't cut through as easily. He struck the flame. It caught. Weak at first, then stronger. The light returned. Not enough to chase away the dark, but enough to push it back. Bruno watched him the entire time. Jack noticed. "You don't trust it either, huh?" he said. Bruno didn't answer, but his eyes stayed on the edges of the clearing, always watching. Jack sat down beside him again, from the fire flickering softly. For a while, neither of them moved. Then Jack reached for the journal. He opened it slowly, his fingers tracing the worn pages. Not for answers, not yet. Just to hold on to something that made sense. He flipped to a section he hadn't studied before. More notes, more diagrams. And then a line, written darker than the rest, underlined. "If they come, they will not come for the land. They will come for what it proves." Jack froze. His eyes scanned the words again. "They will not come for the land." His grip tightened slightly. "They will come for what it proves." The fire crackled softly beside him. Bruno lifted his head. Jack leaned back slowly, staring into the flames. "He knew," Jack said. The words felt heavy, real. "My grandfather knew someone would try to take this." Bruno let out a low breath. Jack looked toward the ridge, toward the hidden cave. "They're not guessing," he said quietly. "They've been waiting." The wind shifted again, colder now, carrying that same faint scent from the stone. Jack's eyes narrowed. "I don't think Rourke just found this place," he continued. "I think he's been looking for it." Silence answered him. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something else. Understanding. Jack closed the journal slowly, then looked down at Bruno. "We're not ahead of this," he said. "We're behind it." Bruno blinked. Jack nodded once. "Which means we don't get to wait." The firelight flickered across his face, casting sharp lines across his features. He wasn't the same man who arrived here. Not anymore. Not the hesitation was still there. The weight. The memories. But something else had taken its place. Resolve. Jack stood up slowly, his body tired but steady. He looked out over the clearing, then at the ridge, then back down at Bruno. "We finish what he started," he said. Bruno pushed himself up, unsteady at first, then stronger, standing, still standing. Jack gave a small, quiet nod. "Yeah," he said. "That's what I thought." The silence remained, but it had changed. No longer empty, no longer heavy now. It was waiting. The kind of silence that comes just before something begins. Dawn came slow and gray. The mountains held on to the night a little longer, shadows clinging to the ridge as if they didn't want to let go. Jack stood near the rock face, the journal tucked under his arm, yet his breath visible in the cold air. Bruno stood beside him, still injured, still alert, still ready. Jack glanced down at him. "You sure about this?" Bruno didn't hesitate. Jack nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." He knelt beside the hidden opening, brushing away the dirt they had disturbed the day before. The rope was still tied where he left it. He tested it again. Firm, reliable. Then he looked down into the darkness. It didn't feel the same anymore. Before, it had felt unknown. Now, it felt like something calling him back. Jack tightened his grip on the rope. "All right," he murmured. "Let's finish this." He lowered himself down carefully, his boots finding the ground with a soft thud. The air wrapped around him again. Cool. Still. But not empty. He turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the chamber just as he left it, the stone walls, the table, the lantern. But now, He saw more. Details he hadn't noticed before. Lines etched into the floor. Faint markings along the walls. Paths. Not random. Connected. "Okay," Jack whispered. Above him, Bruno barked once. Jack looked up. "I'm good," he called. A pause. Then, scratching. "Bruno." Jack frowned. "Stay there." Too late. The sound of shifting dirt echoed down, followed by a soft, heavy drop. Jack spun around. "Bruno!" The dog landed hard but steady, his body low for a second before rising again. Jack stepped forward quickly. "What are you doing?" he said, half frustrated, half relieved. Bruno didn't answer. He didn't need to. He turned immediately, nose low, moving deeper into the cave. And Jack exhaled sharply. "Yeah," he muttered. "Should have known." He followed. The beam of the flashlight moved with them, revealing more of the chamber as they went. The passage Jack had avoided before stretched ahead, narrow at first, then widening gradually. Bruno moved without hesitation, like he had been here before. Jack noticed that. The certainty. The way the dog didn't stop to question. Didn't slow. "All right," Jack said quietly. "Lead the way." The passage opened into another chamber, larger, deeper, and different. The air felt warmer here, not by much, but enough. Jack swept the light across the space and stopped. No way. Along one side of the chamber, rows, carved into the stone. Shelves, not wooden. Stone, built into the walls, and on them, containers, metal, glass, sealed. When Jack stepped closer, his breath catching. Water, stored, clean, preserved. He turned slowly. More shelves, more containers, and beyond that, another section. Raised beds. Soil, dry now, but shaped, structured. This was a system, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Bruno moved ahead again, stopping near the far wall, scratching. Jack followed, his heart beating faster now, not from fear, but from something else, something rising. He reached the wall and saw it. A panel, stone but different, smoother, fitted. Jack ran his hand along the edge. "Hidden," he said. Bruno stepped back. Jack pushed. The panel didn't move. He tried again. Nothing. Then he remembered. The journal. He pulled it from under his arm, flipping quickly through the pages. There, a diagram, and a section labeled Deeper Chamber. A mark, not on the panel. Below it. Jack crouched down, brushing dirt away from the base of the wall. His fingers hit something. Metal, a latch. Hidden. His pulse spiked. "You've got to be kidding me!" He pulled it. The panel shifted. Slow. Heavy. With a low grinding sound, it slid just enough to reveal a narrow opening behind it. Dark. Sealed. Untouched. Jack swallowed hard. "This is it," he said. Bruno stood still, watching, waiting. Jack stepped forward, raising the flashlight. The beam pushed into the darkness and caught. Paper, stacks, boxes, organized, preserved. Jack stepped inside. The air felt different here, still, but not forgotten. He moved closer. The light revealed documents, folders, blueprints. He picked one up, opened it, while his eyes moved across the page, then stopped. His breath caught. Elias Hale. More pages, more notes. Not about survival, about design, structures, systems, patents. Jack's hands trembled slightly. This isn't just a shelter. He turned another page, and there it was. A letter addressed, not to him, but to someone else. Jack read it slowly, carefully. His expression changed, from confusion to realization to something sharper. Anger. Calvin Rourke, he whispered. The name was written clearly, repeated, again and again. Jack's grip tightened. These are agreements, he said, flipping through the pages faster now. Research notes, proposals. He stopped. One page, stamped, rejected. Another, signed. But not by Elias. By someone else. Rourke. Jack felt the pieces falling into place. Not all at once, but enough. He didn't just find this place, Jack said, his voice low. Bruno stepped closer. Jack looked at him. He stole it. The words hung in the air, heavy, real. My grandfather built all of this, Jack continued, and Rourke took the credit, buried it, and left this to rot. His chest tightened, not with fear, with something hotter, deeper. He knew I'd find it, Jack said. He looked down at the letter again, at the final line. If anyone ever returns, it must be someone who understands what this was meant to be. Jack swallowed. His eyes burned. I understand, he whispered. Bruno nudged his hand. Jack nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Now I do. He looked around the chamber again, not as a survivor, not as someone lost, but as someone who had just uncovered the truth. They didn't come for the land, he said. Bruno watched him. They came for this. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something else. Purpose. Jack closed the folder carefully, then turned back toward the opening. His steps were steady now. Sure. They took everything from him, he said quietly. Bruno followed. Jack's grip tightened. They're not taking it again. The light from the outer chamber grew closer. The path back to the surface, to the world above. But Jack knew. Nothing was the same anymore. He didn't just have land. He didn't just have a place to survive. He had the truth. And someone out there was willing to destroy everything to keep it buried. Jack didn't waste time. The moment he and Bruno climbed back up into the cold daylight, something inside him had already changed. The hesitation, the uncertainty, it was gone. Replaced by clarity, purpose, and something else. A quiet, controlled anger that didn't burn wild, but steady. He moved fast, gathering what little he had left, reinforcing what he could near the ridge. The documents were wrapped carefully in cloth and tucked deep inside his pack. Protected. Always protected. Bruno stayed close, though slower now. Jack noticed every step. Easy, he said quietly, kneeling beside him. You did enough. Bruno's ears twitched. He looked toward the tree line, then back at Jack, still watching, still working. Jack shook his head softly. Yeah, he murmured. I know. The day passed under tension. Every sound mattered now, every shift in the wind. Jack didn't wander far. He stayed near the ridge, near the cave, moving like someone who understood that whatever was coming would come fast. And it did. Late afternoon. The light was fading, stretching long shadows across the clearing. Then, the sound. Engines. More than one. Jack froze. Bruno was already up. Low. Focused. Jack didn't need to look to know. They're back. The trucks came into view quickly this time. No hesitation. No pause. They rolled straight up the path and stopped hard near the clearing, dust kicking up around them. Doors opened. More men this time. Not 2. 4. Jack stepped forward, placing himself between them and the ridge. Bruno stood beside him, even injured, still ready. The men spread out slightly, not rushing, but not careful either. Confident, too confident. Then, another door opened. Rourke stepped out. Same calm posture, and same controlled expression. But this time, no smile. He walked forward slowly, stopping a few feet from Jack. "I was hoping we could avoid this," Rourke said. Jack didn't move. "Then you should have stayed gone." Rourke's eyes flicked briefly to Bruno, then to the ridge, then back to Jack. "You found it," he said. Not a question. Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rourke nodded slightly. "I wondered how long it would take," he continued. "Your grandfather always believed someone would come back for it." Jack's jaw tightened. He was right. For a brief moment, something shifted in Rourke's expression. Not regret, but recognition. Then it was gone. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Rourke said. Jack took a step forward. "No," he replied. "I think I finally do." The air between them tightened, and Rourke's voice stayed calm. "That cave, Tomu," he said, "is not a place for you." Jack let out a short breath. "You're right," he said. "It wasn't built for me." Rourke tilted his head slightly. Jack's eyes hardened. "It was built by someone you tried to erase." Silence. Heavy. Rourke's gaze sharpened. "You've read the documents." Jack didn't respond, but that was answer enough. Rourke exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Then you know what it is," he said, "and what it's worth." Jack shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "I know what it means." That hit. Rourke's jaw tightened slightly. "Meaning doesn't matter," he replied. "Control does." He gestured slightly. The men behind him shifted. Jack saw it. The moment things tipped. "Don't," he said. Rourke didn't move. "Step aside," he said calmly. Jack stood his ground. No." The word hung in the air. Simple. Final. Rourke studied him for a long moment. Then, he nodded once. The men moved. Fast. Jack reacted instantly. He stepped forward, blocking the nearest one, shoving him back hard. "Back off!" Bruno lunged. Not reckless. Precise. He moved between Jack and the others, barking loud, forcing them to hesitate for just a second. That second mattered. Jack grabbed one of the men's arms, twisting us just enough to break his momentum, forcing him off balance. "Stay back!" Jack shouted. The clearing exploded into motion. Not a clean fight. Not organized. Just chaos. Men moving. Jack pushing forward. Bruno darting between them, barking, forcing space where there was none. One of the men broke past, heading for the ridge, for the opening. Jack saw it. Everything narrowed again. Not fear. Focus. He moved fast, but not fast enough. The man reached the edge, raised something, a tool, heavy. Bruno saw it too, before Jack could react. The dog moved, fast, faster than he should have. Bruno launched forward, hitting the man square in the chest, knocking him back just as the tool came down, missing its target. The impact sent both of them to the ground. Jack reached them seconds later. Bruno! The man scrambled back, shaken. The others hesitated now. This wasn't going how they expected. Jack stepped forward, his chest rising hard, his eyes locked on Rourke. Enough, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Rourke raised a hand. The men stopped. Just like that. Silence fell again. Rourke looked at Bruno, then at Jack. Something had changed. Not respect, but calculation. And he stepped forward slowly. You're willing to fight for this, he said. Jack didn't look away. Yes. Rourke nodded once, then glanced at the ridge again. You think this ends here? He asked. Jack's voice stayed steady. It already did, he said. You just haven't realized it yet. Rourke's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. Not this time. Instead, he stepped back. Take care of your dog, he said quietly. Then he turned, walked back to his truck. The others followed. No more words. No more threats. Just engines starting. Vehicles pulling away. And then they were gone. Again. The silence returned. Jack stood there for a long moment, his body still tense, his breathing slowly returning to normal. Then he turned. Bruno. The dog stood a few feet away, barely. Jack moved to him quickly, dropping to his knees. Hey, hey! Bruno leaned into him slightly, tired, but standing, still standing. Jack's throat tightened. You keep doing that, he said softly. You keep saving me. Bruno rested his head briefly against Jack's shoulder. Jack closed his eyes for a second, then nodded. All right, he whispered. Now we finish it. He looked back toward the ridge, toward the cave, toward everything that had been buried. Not hidden anymore. Not forgotten. Not theirs to take. Not anymore. The valley didn't feel the same after that day. The wind still moved through the trees. The ridge still stood where it always had. The cave still waited beneath the stone. But something had shifted, not just in the land, in Jack. He didn't wake up with that same hollow weight pressing down on his chest anymore. Well, it was still there, sometimes, in flashes, in quiet moments. But it didn't own him, not like before. That morning he stood near the edge of the property, watching the road below, waiting. Bruno stood beside him, stronger now, still healing, still watchful, always watchful. You think they're coming back? Jack asked quietly. Bruno didn't move, but his ears stayed forward. Jack nodded once. Yeah, he murmured. I think so too. But this time, Jack wasn't alone. The first truck came just after noon. Not black, not polished, old, dust-covered. It rolled up slowly, stopping well short of the ridge. The engine cut. The door opened. An older man stepped out, weathered, careful. He raised a hand, not as a threat, but as a signal. I'm not here for trouble, he called out. Jack didn't move right away, while Bruno stayed low, alert. Jack stepped forward slowly. Then why are you here? The man hesitated, then reached into his jacket. Jack's muscles tensed instantly, but the man only pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it up. I heard about what happened, he said. About Rourke. Jack's eyes narrowed. How? The man gave a faint, humorless smile. Small places, he said. News travels. Jack didn't respond. The man stepped closer, but slowly, carefully. Name's Walter, he added. Used to work the land around here, before things changed. Jack studied him, then the paper. Why bring that to me? Walter looked at the ridge, at the cave, then back at Jack. "Because that land doesn't belong to him," he said quietly. "Never did." Jack felt something tighten in his chest. Walter stepped forward another pace, stopping just out of reach. He extended the paper. Jack took it this time. Carefully. He unfolded it. His eyes moved across the page. Legal records. Old. Stamped. Signed. Elias Hale. Jack's grip tightened. "He filed these years ago," Walter said. "Tried to protect what he built. Tried to prove it was his." Jack swallowed. "What happened?" Walter let out a slow breath. "Rourke buried it," he said. "Bought people. Silenced others. Made sure no one took him seriously." Jack's jaw tightened. "He called my grandfather crazy." Walter nodded. "That's how it works," he said. "If people believe you're broken, they stop listening." The words hit harder than anything else. Jack looked up. Walter held his gaze. "You're not the first man he tried to do that to," Walter added. Silence. Heavy. Real. Jack folded the paper slowly. "Why help me?" he asked. Walter shrugged slightly. "Because I watched what he did," he said, "and I didn't do anything about it." He glanced at Bruno, then back at Jack. "Not making that mistake twice." The wind shifted, carrying something new, not tension, not fear, something steadier. Others came after that, not all at once, not in a crowd, one by one. A woman who remembered Elias. A man who had seen the early designs before they disappeared. Another who had heard stories but never believed them until now. They didn't come to take. They came to confirm, to see, to stand. Jack didn't trust it at first. Couldn't. But Bruno didn't growl, didn't warn. He watched them, measured them, and then he stayed calm. That was enough. Jack stood at the ridge one evening. He had the sun dropping low behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land. The papers were spread out on the makeshift table beside him. Evidence. Proof. Not just of what the cave was, but who built it, and who tried to erase it. Walter stood nearby. "You take this into town," he said. "You make it official." Jack nodded slowly. "And Rourke?" Walter's expression hardened. "He won't be able to hide from it this time." Jack looked out over the land again. The clearing, the ridge, the cave, everything that had been broken, everything that had been rebuilt. He felt it again. That quiet shift inside his chest. Not anger, not pain. Something else. Something stronger. "I thought I was done," Jack said quietly. Walter glanced at him. "With what?" Jack took a slow breath. "Oh, fighting." Walter studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "Men like him," he said, nodding toward the road. "They don't stop unless someone stands in front of them." Jack looked down at Bruno. The dog met his gaze. Steady, unwavering. Jack nodded once. "Then I guess I'm not done." The next few days moved fast. Faster than anything before. Papers filed, records confirmed, voices raised. And this time, people listened. The story spread. Not just of the land, but of Elias Hale, of what he built, of what was taken from him. And slowly, the truth pushed its way back into the light. Jack stood in the clearing one morning, watching as the first official truck arrived. Not Rourke's. Different. Markings on the side. People who carried authority, not force. They stepped out, looking around, taking notes, and asking questions. Jack answered, calm, clear, steady. Bruno stayed beside him the entire time, not once stepping away. By the time they left, something had changed again. Not just in the land, but in the story. Rourke didn't come back. Not after that. His name still lingered. His shadow still stretched. But it didn't reach here anymore. Not like before. Jack stood at the ridge as the sun rose, the light spilling across the stone, catching the edges of the cave. He placed a hand on Bruno's back. "We did it," he said quietly. Bruno leaned into him. Jack exhaled slowly. For the first time, not in years, not since before everything broke. He didn't feel like he was carrying the past alone. He had something now. Something real. Something worth standing for. And for the first time, he understood something his grandfather must have known all along. Some things aren't built to be hidden. They're built to be found. Years passed. Not quickly. Not all at once. But steadily. Like the mountain itself, shaped over time by quiet, constant change. The land was no longer empty. Where broken ground once stretched wild and forgotten, there now stood order. Not perfect, not polished, but real, alive. The clearing had grown into something more, a place with purpose. Wooden structures stood where Jack had once built his first fire. A small cabin, reinforced against the wind, a sheltered area for supplies, pathways worn into the earth from repeated steps. And beyond it, the ridge, still silent, still strong, but no longer hidden. Jack stood at the entrance one early morning, the light just beginning to spill across the limestone. The heavy door had been restored, not to seal the cave, but to protect it, to honor it. He rested his hand against the wood for a moment, then stepped inside. The air greeted him like it always had, cool, steady, familiar. But now, it wasn't unknown, it was home. The chambers beneath the stone had changed too, carefully, respectfully. The systems Elias Hale had built were no longer buried in silence. They were alive again. Water flowed. Light reached deeper through guided shafts above. Small patches of green grew in places where only dry soil once sat. Not large, not perfect, but enough. Jack walked slowly through the passage, his boots echoing softly against the stone. Bruno followed beside him. Older now, his pace slower, but his presence just as strong. Not always. They reached the main chamber. Jack paused. There, near the far wall, a small group sat quietly. 3 men, 1 woman, all different, all carrying something heavy behind their eyes. Not wounds you could see, but the kind that stayed. They looked up as Jack entered, not startled, not unsure, just aware. Jack gave a small nod. "Morning." A few of them nodded back. No questions, no pressure. That was the rule here. You came when you were ready. You stayed as long as you needed, and no one asked you to explain what you couldn't put into words. Jack moved toward one of the stone shelves, checking the water containers, adjusting a small valve Elias had once designed to regulate flow. It worked, still worked, after all these years. Bruno settled near the center of the room, but lowering himself carefully onto the stone floor. One of the men reached out slowly, letting his hand rest near Bruno's side, not touching at first. Waiting. Bruno didn't pull away. After a moment, he leaned slightly into the hand. The man exhaled quietly. Jack watched it from across the room, then looked away. Not to ignore it, but to let it be. That was part of it too. Healing didn't come loud. It came in moments like that. Small, quiet, real. Later, Jack stepped back outside, the sun now higher, warming the land. The valley stretched out before him, no longer empty, no longer forgotten. He could see movement in the distance. A truck, another arrival. Not fast, not urgent, just someone finding their way here, like he had. Jack took a slow breath. The air felt different now. Not heavy, not sharp, just open. But he turned slightly. Bruno stood beside him again. A little slower to rise these days, but still there. Jack rested a hand on his head. "You did this," he said quietly. Bruno looked up at him. Jack smiled faintly. "I mean it," he continued. "You pulled me through all of it." The dog's tail moved once. Simple, steady. Jack nodded. "Twice," he added. His voice softened. "More than twice." The wind moved gently across the ridge. Not cold, not harsh, just there. Jack looked out over everything again. The land, the cave, the people finding their way back from things they couldn't escape alone. He thought about the man he had been the night he was thrown out. Broken, lost, convinced there was nothing left. Then he looked down at Bruno. Still here. Still steady. Still the one thing that never let go. Jack exhaled slowly. "They said I came back broken," he murmured. Bruno stayed beside him. Jack's eyes lifted to the horizon. "But you led me somewhere that made me whole again." The sunlight spread across the land, filling the valley with warmth. Not all at once, but enough, and for the first time, Jack didn't feel like he was standing at the edge of something. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not hiding, not running, not surviving. Living. And beside him, the dog who had never left. Not for a second. Not even when everything else had. Do you want me to continue? If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt lost, or found strength in the one who stayed, drop a simple 1 in the comments. And if you believe loyalty like Bruno's still exists in this world, type dog. Well, I read every single comment. Subscribe if you want more real, powerful stories like this. Stories about survival, loyalty, and the kind of bond that never breaks. Your next story is waiting.